everybody. So this weekend is GARBAUGUST 1.5. Yay! I got something on my hat. I don't know what that is. Fluff. It's cold in here. Yes, I am wearing a hat inside. I always feel warmer when I wear a hat. If there's any people out there that are suddenly surprised by a cold snap, always wear a hat. I'll even wear a hat to bed if it gets cold enough. It's the heat. Yes, we do have heat in here. It's just there's kind of a draft. So I try to bundle up, multiple layers and everything, because it was -10 last time I checked, and it's supposed to be something like -20 with the wind chill. That's Celsius. I think that's like 14 Fahrenheit or something. It's cold here anyway. It's cold as balls. It's cold as Hoth. Though not everybody gets the Hoth reference, unfortunately. All right, GARBAUGUST 1.5. I read my first Danielle Steele novel. Oh boy, oh boy, oh boy. What to say about it? I seem to recall this book being around the house when I was a kid. I think that's one of the reasons I picked it. My mother was a big Danielle Steele fan, so we had tons and tons of Danielle Steele paperbacks around the house, but I never picked one up because it just never interested me. Every time my mother read a Danielle Steele novel, she was always crying. Ah! Now, I wasn't a crier when I was a teenager, although, after 20, 30 years later, 30 years, good Lord, so 30 years later, and, deaths in the family and deaths of my friends, and get my heart broken, and probably a little closer to water than I was back then. There were a couple times when I was like, oh, okay, that's kind of cool. But overall, this book, oh boy. If I were giving it a regular review, I would give it probably 4 out of 5. It's readable. It's not horrible. The ebook, I don't know what is happening with the quality of editing lately, but there were typos, there were words misplaced, there were way more typos than there should have been in a book that big. I'll give it 3 out of 5 trash cans. Pretty flat characters, fairly predictable plot. The main character was such a Mary Sue. Oh my goodness. She's just gorgeous and perfect and fantastic at everything she does, and she never has to try, and then all the guys are just like stud candy. And wow. All right. So I'm going to go into the plot probably fairly more in depth than you probably care about, but it's my show. I want to talk about it. So I guess you could consider it chick lit. I mean, Danielle Steele has always been considered an author of fiction that's primarily aimed at women. I guess that's probably one of the reasons she is considered, one of the trash authors. You got a lot of scenery porn, which is pretty common. There's lots of descriptions of the ranch and everything else. I would also say, what would be interesting, her life has been, wow, she has had an interesting life. She was married to a guy who was in jail. She's married like 6 times. She has a whole litter of children. I think something like 7 or 8 kids. And this woman has just like been everywhere. And one thing I will give her is she is damn prolific. I mean, she probably writes more in an hour than I've ever written in my life, right? So I am quite impressed with that work ethic. So anyway, so Palomino is about this woman named Samantha Taylor. She's a high-powered advertising executive in New York City. And her husband, who's a newscaster, leaves her for another woman. Now, this woman is able to have kids, and Samantha isn't. This is like going to be one of the sort of things. So, of course, she's knocked on her ass by it, which is a hard thing to go through. Getting your heart broken is bad enough, but when it's somebody you've been with 11 years, it's going to take some time. So her coworkers, they tell her, why don't you take a vacation? Why don't you go somewhere? Just get away from work, get away from the newscast, be somewhere else. So she calls up. She had a friend who owned, whose aunt owned a dude ranch in California when they were teenagers. Sorry about that. Her friends tell her to go to her dude ranch. So she goes out, and so we get to meet Aunt Caroline, and Caroline's been banging the foreman, whose name is Bill, for like 20 years, but they've never told anybody. And Samantha starts working on the ranch, and of course she's brilliant and fabulous and great at everything she does. Because, she's a fantastic horsewoman, and she's just been doing this her entire life, even though she's lived in New York. So the assistant foreman, Tate Jordan, of course, she and he fight. He's this tall, dark, and handsome, rugged, good-looking guy, and they hate each other on sight. So, of course, they're going to be the love interest. And Caroline has this horse that they call Black Beauty. He's very large, and he's very strong and very strong-willed. He hasn't quite been broken for riding yet, but Caroline lets her ride him, and there's a lot of foreshadowing going on. Something really bad's going to happen. But she takes him out. She has no problem, and Tate, quite rightly, and I sided with Tate on this one. I think Samantha's only flaw here is hubris. She just thinks that because she's so beautiful, wonderful, and perfect, she can do whatever she wants. Even when people tell her, don't do that, it's fucking dangerous, right? So he gives her a lecture, and he says, you're taking out a horse that you've never ridden on in unfamiliar territory. What the hell are you doing? But she, nothing happens this time, and she takes the horse back, and she's like, blah, 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 I'm not going to do what you're going to tell me. So eventually she and Tate, as time goes on, she and Tate start a relationship. And this is like the most boring part of the book, because happy couples are dull. They really are. It's so dull to watch, to be there when they're like cooing at each other, and the inside jokes and the tickle fights. And it's just like, shut up. So that was where I wanted to poke sticks in my eyes. It was so boring. So then he gets, just for no reason at all, he buys her a color TV, which she doesn't even want. And they start watching the news, and she sees her ex-husband. And then they have this incredibly stupid fucking fight about how Tate Jordan doesn't think that he's as good as this disgusting idiot pretty boy. And he's like, well, why didn't you ever tell me? And of course, in my mind, I'm thinking, so what she should have said is, I didn't tell you about the shit I flushed down the toilet yesterday, and he means about that much to me. But oh no, she couldn't fucking tell him, like, this piece of shit left me. Why do I care about him anymore? Oh no, but they have this big fight. And he says to her, do you know how much money I make? I only make $18,000. Okay, you know what? I looked up $18,000. Now, this is a guy who has no expenses, unless he's like gambling or some shit. His wife, I think she's dead. He's got a grown son. And he lives on this ranch where they don't talk about, if he pays room and board or not. But if he's making 18 grand and not paying any bills, this guy has a pretty good freaking little nest eggs tucked away. And I looked up what that is in 2023 dollars. That's $64,000. Oh, boo fucking who. I'll never in my life make anything approaching $64,000. Get over yourself, you idiot. So anyway, they have this big fight, and he leaves. He leaves her, and he never talks to her again. And she's absolutely devastated. She can't find him. Nobody knows where he went. He could be working anywhere. He could be working under an assumed name. Nobody knows, and nobody's telling her. So eventually she decides to go back to New York, and her career takes off from there because, again, she's beautiful, wonderful, and perfect. And eventually And here's, okay, so now we're like halfway through the book, and here's where it finally gets interesting. So she is on a commercial shoot on a ranch, because the idea that she kind of had before was that they were going to sell these cars by putting them on, comparing them to wild horses or some shit. I don't know. So she gets on an unknown horse in unknown territory, like she did with Black Beauty a couple times. And unfortunately, this time she's not so lucky. The horse throws her. She has a terrible accident. She ends up paralyzed in a wheelchair. So that's like the big end of Act 2 or whatever you want to call it. I mean, I'm sure there's a pretty clear 7-act or 7-part plot structure here, but I'm too lazy to go through it. I might do that someday just for fun. So now that she's in a wheelchair, she spends like a year in the hospital, or many, many months in the hospital. She's got to overhaul her whole life, but everybody is behind her. Like, they're really helping her out. Like, when you've got somebody with a permanent disability, there's a whole lot more they have to go through. Like, they don't just get over it that quick, and then all of a sudden they're a nice person, and there's a little bit of talking here and there about, oh, this is a new life, and then, oh, all of a sudden everything's beautiful and wonderful and perfect again. I found that a little bit, I mean, it wasn't too bad in the way it addressed it, but it was still a little bit annoying. So, along the way, she's beautiful and wonderful and perfect at her job, and she gets a promotion at work. But at the same time, Aunt Caroline dies and leaves her the branch. So now she's got to decide what she's going to do. So she and her best friend and his family go out to the ranch for Thanksgiving weekend, and she's like, no, I'm going to stay. So she decides that she goes out for a ride, because at first she was like, well, what am I going to do? I'm in a wheelchair. But then she figures out she is going to, she's got her freedom back. Being on a horse is like having legs again. Oh, and the other thing I forgot, it's called Palomino because she's got this long blonde hair. She's always being described in these horsey, and she's got long legs, and she's got a tan face, and she's a little Palomino running around, and like she's frequently described this way. So I actually had to look up. I thought, yeah, that is kind of interesting. Can you ride, if you're paralyzed? And apparently, yeah, you can. There used to be, I don't know if after COVID, I don't know if they ended up surviving, but there used to be a stable here that taught disabled kids how to ride. So I guess it's possible. Now this lady, so I just had to find this thing. And this girl is, young woman. So she needs to be lifted into her saddle, but with a little bit of finagling and sorting. And there she is. She's in her saddle. I'm not going to put too much of this, but I like this one because she looks a lot like the way the characters described, and she's even riding a Palomino. Look at that. Oh, what a pretty horse. So yeah, that's the Palomino riding a Palomino. Samantha never actually rides a Palomino through the course of the book, but she's always described with this beautiful, perfect, long blonde hair. So this girl's got long blonde hair, so I thought I'd show you that video. So yes, a paralyzed person can apparently ride a horse, and now, oh man, I am deathly terrified of horses. I mean, even reading about the horses, I was like, I mean, they're lovely creatures to look at, but, And when I was a kid, I was only ever on a horse once. I was 8 years old, and my mother had a friend who had a hobby farm, and they had a couple of horses. And I don't know what this guy was thinking. My sister told me later that apparently the horse wasn't a particularly good horse for handling for little kids. Like some horses are as complacent as the day is long, and you can just, you can just put them up there and no problems. But this was not one of those horses. It was, I don't know if it was a rescue or what, but it was like really high strung. So what happened was, well, first of all, it took me ages to even just climb up the damn thing. And because I was short, because I'm short and I don't have long legs and I'm not a climber. So I'm like trying to climb up this horse, which I'm sure could not have been pleasant for the horse. And then I finally get up into the saddle. And I don't know what I did wrong. Like, I don't even remember if my feet were in the stirrups or not. But I must have gone like this and just like gotten really tight, like arms, knees, heels, everything, just digging right into the horse. Well, the horse flipped out and started like going around and around in circles. And I'm like screaming, trying to hold on to this poor horse. And it's going around and around. And I'm flipping out. And it's flipping out. And that was it. I got down from that and never, ever again. Okay, so I'm so afraid of horses. And my friend, I have a friend, Caroline, as well. And her dad had a horse, and we went to visit him one time. And she showed me how to feed a horse a carrot without getting my hand chewed off. And that was like the best, the closest I've been to a horse in my entire life. And it was terrifying. Never again. I'm just, nope, not a horse person. So anyway, she starts this, so she decides that she's going to have a ranch for disabled kids. And then here's where this sort of took off. Here's where it actually got a lot more interesting, like her work with the kids. But again, everything's beautiful, wonderful, and perfect. And then this kid, Timmy, shows up. Why did she name the kid Timmy? Come on. It's like Tiny Tim. And of course, I can't help but be reminded of the South Park character. But Timmy's horribly neglected and abused, and his mother didn't get him a shot, so he had polio. Where he got polio, I don't know. But, it's not like it just floats around the air, but whatever. But through being on the ranch, Timmy starts to blossom, and he's doing a lot better. He's a lot healthier. And she wants to try and fight for custody of him. So she ends up going to court. And this is the part that really irritated me. Irritated the shit out of me. So Timmy's mother is a junkie and a prostitute. And so she'll go off and she'll turn her tricks, and he's a trick baby, and she will have her addictions. And she got arrested, and they found the kid in the apartment by himself, where he'd just been eating stuff out of cans for days. I don't think he'd ever been to school. Like, this poor kid was like 5 or 6 years old and just horribly neglected. And she'd been beating him with an umbrella, so of course she's not a good mother by any means. So, but because she goes to jail, she goes through rehab, she's cleaned up her act, she's arranged a job in a hotel, which everybody's like, oh, she's just gonna go there to find John's. I mean, the way this woman doesn't even give it a name. And I've never liked the disposable sex worker trope at all. But the judge finds in her favor because she's genuinely trying to clean up. And Samantha's devastated, of course. She's so upset she doesn't want to lose Timmy. But here's what really pissed me off. Like, wouldn't the most sensible solution, and this is why I say that hubris is Samantha's biggest or only flaw, wouldn't it make more sense to just offer the mother a position on the ranch and a cabin so she and Timmy can still live there, because she's got a whole bunch of cabins, still live there, have a job to keep her occupied so that she's away from her drug friends, and if she's got food on the table and a roof over her head, she doesn't need to turn tricks anymore. She can focus on raising Timmy properly. Samantha can keep an eye on them and make sure Timmy's safe and still, be part of his life. I mean, Samantha will help everybody, but she won't help this poor woman who had a kid at 16 and is an addict. Like, what the hell? And at no point does anybody even consider something like that. Although that would be the best solution for everybody. But no, Samantha doesn't even consider it. And then a couple pages later, the mother's just killed off and Timmy comes back to her. Because, all junkies just have to die in a puddle of their own filth or some fucking shit. I don't know. It really bothered me. So a few days after Timmy comes back, it's New Year's Eve, and there's a young man who's been working on the ranch, and it's kind of hinted around. Oh, he's been to a whole bunch of other places, and he's a good rancher, and blah blah blah. So he dies, and it turns out that he's Tate's son. So Tate, so they can't get hold of Tate. They bury the kid on the farm, and then Tate decides to come back into her life, and all of a sudden he declares his undying love for her, and everybody's got a happy ending, and blah blah blah. So that's the full plot, and I know I shouldn't spoil it like that, but there were some things that just really irritated me about it. The disposable sex worker really, really got to me. Because, what the hell, hero? I mean, the stupid fight and the very contrived way that Tate leaves and then comes back is just dumb. But I guess I'm not the target audience. And I've been kind of mulling over why we think that romance novels are trash. Or why quickly produced popular novels fall into that trash category. And I think mostly for me, it's just the contrivances of the plot, that awful Mary Sue quality that the characters have. Everybody's, perfect and wonderful and filthy rich, and nobody has any real problems, and if they do, they get over them soon. And they have the resources that they can get over them. And if they don't, then, well, they just die. They lose their kids and die. I mean. But other than that, I mean, it was entertaining enough. I don't think I'll be reading any more Danielle Steele. I thought that 482 pages was just too long. Everything that happens in the first half of the book she probably could have condensed it down to about 50 pages and told the same story. The second half of the book was a lot more interesting. The detailed descriptions got a little bit repetitive, and then all of the love stuff is like, just come on. Oh, just kill me now. So, but there's my first experience with Danielle Steele. GARBAUGUST 1.5. Hope you're reading lots of horror. Have a great day.